The student loan debt revolt starts here, and this is how we do it. A call to action by the rogue nemesis. Please distribute this freely by any and all means possible. I know for millions of you, student loans are a very painful reality that you hate acknowledging and dealing with. How many of you are saddled with debt you cannot pay back, working crappy jobs, living at home or house sharing after having the social contract promise of the American dream broken? And how about the fortunate minority of you who have a decent job and can pay on your loans but have little left over at the end of the month and cannot save for retirement? Is this how you want to spend the next 20 years financially? Is this what you signed up for? Is this the American dream you are now financing at 6% for 20 years? In the last presidential election, many of you voted for the lesser of two evils, Joe Biden, hoping that he would cancel your student debt because of what he promised during his campaign. Like any other politician, he played you for a fool. He is part of the system that is designed to keep you a lifelong wage slave. Do you think he really wants to set you free when he is beholden to the big banks, Wall Street, and the Federal Reserve? The government and financial system, who put you into debt, will not get you out of debt. They won't permit it. That should be loud and clear to you by now. And yet, you still believe your captors will set you free. While groups like debtcollective.org are trying to create a movement through political action and online advocacy, this will never work. Let me pound this into your heads. Your captors will not set you free. Your captors will not set you free. Your captors will not set you free. Ending student loan debt and predatory lending and manufactured inflated education costs are moral imperatives. You see, the government and big banks took advantage of you and your parents' dreams and desperations. Corporations made it so that you must have a degree to get a good job. Knowing this, colleges and universities marked up the cost of education so high that you have to go into debt to get an education, with hungry lenders just waiting to enslave you into debt. Essentially what the government, big banks, the education institutions and corporations did was create a debt-to-participate system for the wage slave masses. You either go into massive student loan debt to get a decent job and have nice things and chase down the American dream, or you'll spend your life pushing brooms, folding and hanging garments, selling plastic baubles or flipping burgers in regret and humiliation. And they used predatory lending tactics which deceived uninformed parents and children who knew nothing about how the finance industry works, let alone about how interest works, with hidden predatory lending tactics that prohibits you from paying on the principal balance until your interest is fully paid off, or the ability to declare bankruptcy. If you have student loans, you have a moral obligation to free yourself as well as call out the entire system for what it is, predatory and enslaving. You have a moral obligation, not only to yourself, but to your friends and children who want a better education and a better life. Do you want to see them saddled with student debt, their lives forever stunted and life options limited? Let me remind you how skewed this system is in favor for the elite ruling ownership class. How sick were you as we watched the government backstop and bail out the big banks and insurance companies as the criminal subprime mortgage crisis ravaged America? All because of fraudulent mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps, all of which were based off of predatory lending and systemic greed. $700 billion, if not more, went to bail out them, not us, as millions lost their homes and jobs while the economy tanked and never really recovered. How many of you were sickened by the trillions given out by Trump, the Republicans and Democrats to keep big business afloat during COVID, while you got almost nothing and were told to sit home and not work while you lose your jobs and incomes? How many of you are sick of hearing about the billions in subsidies that are given to big business every year so they can make even more money on top of their tax breaks? And doesn't it make you sick when people can rack up tens of thousands in credit card debt, declare bankruptcy and eventually get a fresh start? But you, saddled with student loan debt, cannot. And doesn't it infuriate you that business owners have no personal liability if the economy fails and their business goes bust? Or if they commit fraud? Or they can abuse the system in their favor? How disgusting it is that the elite ruling ownership class outsource, automate and AI our jobs away, leaving us no opportunity to adapt our earning capabilities or reinvent ourselves with a fresh start. You should be furious that they have rigged the system to enslave us in such a way and that we cannot be bailed out for our measly little 50 to 130k student loan debts. But yet, we roll over and take it. Just like the manufactured subprime mortgage fraud the system created this student loan debt trap. What they did was planned, immoral and criminal, but because they own the system they can get away with it. So no placard-carrying mass chanting or grassroots advocacy political pressure will ever free the tens of millions of student loan debt-burdened wage slaves because it keeps you where they want you, enslaved, financially crippled and feeling powerless. But I will reveal to you that we have the power, and that the only true way to set ourselves and our posterity free from student loan debt is through terms the elite ruling ownership class understands, and that is through financial terms. I am going to tell you what most of you haven't figured out yet, nor the elite ruling ownership class, and it should empower you and should scare the hell out of the elite ruling ownership class, and that is, without us paying on those student loans, they lose power and control in a most devastating way. And let me tell you, as a student of history, finance, technology, science and systems engineering, that a house of cards built on $1.75 trillion in student loan debt that we support with our student loan payments can be toppled so very easily, for if all our payments were to cease, if we, the wage slave class, stopped being the foundation for this house of cards that crushes us month after month, year after year, and we no longer pay back our loans en masse, all bets are off and the house of cards will fold and collapse. That is how we get their real attention. That is how we free ourselves and our posterity from student loan debt. I know most of you are scared and don't want to hurt your precious credit score, but the only way we are going to rid ourselves and our posterity from student loan debt, predatory lending and inflated education costs is by collective and decisive action in a most serious and deliberate way. Political reform and relief are pipe dreams, so we have to collectively do this together and start the student debt revolt here and now, and the way we do it is by refusing to pay back our student loans and defaulting en masse. That is the only clear way to send the message to the ruling elite ownership class that we are not going to play your game anymore and we refuse to be your slave. We have to collectively stand up and say, look here you big banks, government and Federal Reserve, you bailed out big business time and time again, fraud after fraud, while subsidizing them year after year all on our backs and taxes, so now it's our turn for our bailout. You either eliminate all student debt or we will crash your system, subprime mortgage style. If everyone stops being afraid and collaborates together, stops paying their student loans and defaults, that $1.75 trillion in student debt will crash the system. God only knows who holds those loans and how they are packaged and the obscene amount of money they are making off interest. But what I am betting is that they are packaged and wired much like the mortgages that created the subprime mortgage crisis. More than likely our student loans are all wrapped up in collateralized loan obligations and have swaps on them, all held by the big banks and the US government, making money off of interest differentials. So if all the student loan debtors work together collectively and default, we cripple them, and in concert, if millions of us remove what money we have from our banks and short all of the big banks' stocks, we can send a message to the elite ruling ownership class that we have the power, and that we will no longer be your student loan debt slaves. More than likely the way student loans are packaged and wired and integrated into the financial system, they are primed to obliterate the financial system, and what you, the tens of millions of you student loan debtors haven't realized, and what I am about to tell you, is that we collectively control the detonation switch. And we can do this by doing very little and nothing, a visit to the ATM, a few clicks or taps on investing apps, and not clicking the send button on our online monthly student loan payments. No need for placards and demonstrations, harassed, pepper sprayed and beaten by police. A student debt revolt done from the comfort of your own home. Tens of millions of financial detonation switches in our hands they cannot control. We are talking epic level, subprime mortgage crisis power in our hands, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. Remember, it is not about the money, it's about sending a message. If you want to end your student loan debt and your wage slavery, we must collectively default on student loans en masse and simultaneously short the big banks and loan holders. The system cannot handle 1.75 trillion in student loan defaults, and that is the mechanism by which we free ourselves from student loan debt, or the system collapses. They will have no choice. This is a message meant to inspire action. This was a message from the rogue nemesis.